everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Winsor Newton classes here at Michael's. We're really delighted to have everyone on board today. We have so many enrollments, and we're going to have a big class today. So I see a lot of different people. So why don't you shout out, let us know where you're from. I hope we have some return visitors, but lots of new visitors. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to do something Valentine inspired. We all, need a little boost every now and then. And what better thing is than to send someone some wonderful, warm, loving greetings. So today I'm going to have Mandy Peltier introduce you to making some of these lovely Valentine cards. So why don't you take it away, Mandy? And please be active on the chat. And for those of you, just follow along and enjoy. So take it away, Mandy.
Thank you, Jeannie, and hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you all today, teaching another class. And I don't think I've ever said this in any of my classes before, but you all are putting in the chat where you're from. Well, I'm actually from Indiana by birth, so I'm a Midwesterner by birth, but I live in the Columbus, Georgia area now. And I think I saw a few people put on there that you're in Atlanta or other areas of Georgia. So just thought I'd throw that out there. And we only have an hour today, and I try to keep within that limit. So I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so that we can go ahead and get started. And if you want to learn more about me, I would just point you to my website. It's mandypeltier.com. And you can read more about my professional accomplishments or my interests there. Okay, so I always start with sort of an overhead view of our supply list. And there's a couple things that I want you to grab because I want to make a little stencil for our Be Mine Heart. So this is sort of a last minute kind of inclusion. So if you could just grab a scrap sheet of watercolor paper from when you trimmed and cut your 3 4x6 size sheets of paper, and a pair of scissors and a ruler. Now, if you don't have these 3 things handy, it's totally okay. You can just eyeball freehand draw. Or with the provided outline, you can always trace the outlines onto your cards. Don't fret about it. I just wanted to throw that out there first thing. And then the other thing I want to mention is we are going to be focusing on 2 cards today, this Be Mine card and this Xoxo card. We're going to mix 8 colors in our palette using 4 colors in our Skechers Pocket Box set. There will be some leftover paint in your palette, enough so that you can make a 3rd bonus card. The directions for this bonus card are in the written directions that are uploaded onto the chat function. Or if you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, you should be able to download the directions from the description for the class. So I wanted to throw that out. There are a few supplies on the supply list that are only for this card. So I'm going to point those out. It's the masking fluid, the Q-tip, and the gold metallic marker. So those are just for the little bonus card here. All right. So with that said, let's go ahead and transfer our outlines to our paper. So what you need right now is that pair of scissors, the ruler, a graphite pencil, an eraser, and your 4x6 cards. Everything else can sort of be moved off to the side for now, so we can just sort of focus on one thing at a time. All right, so let's start with the one that I think is the easiest, which is the Xoxo card. And I'll leave that up here, and let me lower my camera just a bit. All right, that way you can see just a little bit better today, a little bit closer. Okay, so the Xoxo, the lettering here, it's centered both vertically and horizontally onto the paper. So it's centered right in the middle of the paper. If we were to draw an invisible line down the middle of the paper from top to bottom, you would see that the first O in the Xoxo and the second X are on each side of the middle division. So I like to start my lettering by writing either the second X or the first O so that I can make sure it's kind of centered. So what I'm going to do to help me, you don't have to do this, you can totally just eyeball it. I'm just going to draw a light line, what looks like the middle, and then I'm going to draw another line that that's horizontal and goes through that vertical line, just to sort of help me with centering the lettering. And then one thing I want to point out with these letters, the X, one line is slightly curved and the other line is straight, a diagonal straight line. So hopefully you can see that holding up a little bit closer to the camera. One has a slight curve and one is straight. And then with the O, there is a little gap. So the O doesn't fully connect in on itself. There's just a little gap. This is totally stylistic. If you want to completely connect your O or even do a fancy little swirl along the top, you can. I just did this for a stylistic choice. So I'll start with the second X here, and I'm going to want the center of the X to sort of be the middle of the horizontal invisible line. So I'm just going to start by drawing my slightly curved line and then my straight line that goes through it, and hopefully where they intersect is right along the middle. And then I'll go ahead and draw my O that's to the right of that. Now we could today spend a lot of time fussing with this, trying to get it perfect. I'm going to try not to do that because we have a lot to squeeze in this hour. So I'm just going to try and get it as nice as possible. But I always encourage you guys in these classes not to try to get it perfect in the hour you're with me, to just use this hour to really learn the process, to maybe just practice it. And then when the class is over, you can always follow the written directions and try to redo it. Or when this class is uploaded to YouTube within the next 48 hours, you can watch it again and pause as needed to keep up. All right, so you'll just write your XOXO, and then the outline for this card is done. So it's not nearly as time intensive as my snowflakes a couple of weeks ago. All right, so that's
Andy,
the first card. Yes.
Quick question for you, because it's so faint and light. Would you just mind holding that up closer to the camera? And as we said, perfect. That's a great view. Okay.
It's literally just XOXO that I've just tried to center as best as I can right in the middle of the paper.
Right. It's very fluid. There's no, we didn't take any measurements this time. Typically, Mandy will give you every detail, but today it's just going to be a little free form. So yes, like she said, go along with it.
Yes, for this. I am going to show you how to make a stencil though for the hearts on the Be Mine card. And the reason why is if you tried to freehand draw these, it's likely that all three full hearts you see here will not be exactly the same size. And this is supposed to kind of look like a banner, if you will. So I want it to be asymmetrical very symmetrical where they all are the same size. So I'm going to show you a little trick to making a stencil first that you can use to trace around. And so I am going to give you a couple of measurements for this so that our hearts will all be about the same size, because what I want us to be able to do is fit on 3 full hearts right in the middle of this paper. And then there will be a little bit of space for a couple partial hearts. So 3 full hearts and a couple partial hearts. All right. So with a scrap sheet of paper and your ruler, we're going to do the same process we did a couple weeks ago for my snowflake class, where we're going to draw a horizontal line and a vertical line that are exactly the same length. They'll create a cross and they'll intersect each other right in the middle of each line. Okay. So just like we did 2 weeks ago, put your ruler down on your paper and draw a straight horizontal line that is 1 1/4 inches long. 1 1/4 inches long. And then I'm going to mark the halfway point of this line. You can eyeball it if you're not very good with a ruler. Half of 1 1/4 inches is 5/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to draw a little mark at 5/8 of an inch. So you can see I have a horizontal line that is 1 1/4 inches, and I put a little dot at the halfway point, 5/8 of an inch. Okay. And then I am going to turn my little scrap sheet of paper 1 turn so that the line I drew is now vertical. I'm going to line my ruler up against that dot I drew to mark the middle, but I'm going to put my ruler up on it at 5/8 of an inch, so the halfway point. And then I'm going to draw another line that is 1 1/4 inches in length. And then with any luck, you should have 2 lines that are 1 1/4 inches long, each the same size, that perfectly intersect each other in the middle, and it creates a cross. Okay. And you can see my little finished stencil here. Here's my 2 lines. And so you can kind of see where we're headed with this. What we're going to do now is we're going to draw a straight line So we're going to connect from the horizontal line here, the left endpoint down to the bottom endpoint of the vertical line. So I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not going to use my ruler. So the left endpoint of the horizontal line down to the bottom endpoint of the vertical line. And we're going to do the same on the other side. The right endpoint of the horizontal line down to the bottom endpoint of the vertical line. And now to draw the top of the heart, I'm basically just going to follow the same direction. I'm going to go up and then curve it up to the top endpoint of the vertical line. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side to draw a little heart here. And then you can correct any little curve mistakes you may have made. Sometimes I find it's easier to correct the mistakes as you cut it out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut out our little stencil with your pair of scissors. And again, if you don't have scissors and a ruler handy and you didn't follow these directions, you can always just freehand draw these hearts onto your working paper. You can trace them using the outline, whatever you want to do. But this makes it so that all 3 full hearts are going to be the same size.
Hi, Mandy. Yes, I think that you are very detail oriented, and thank you for all those measurements. But as she mentioned, the purpose of that stencil is so that you have some symmetry when you're creating the card, but they could be any shape and they could be hand drawn. I mean, we can go old school the way I used to do it. You could just take a piece of paper and when you were fold it in half and then do half of it and open it up to give you, an easier stencil to follow. But this is also all being recorded. And like I said, follow along, and then at your leisure, you can go back and do it, but just relax and do the best you can and improvise.
Yes, I want these classes to be stress-free. And just remember, you can always rewatch tomorrow and pause as needed to keep up. I was going to show this later, but I'll show it now. You can always do hearts that are different sizes. It's still going to look really pretty when you're done. Okay, so they don't all have to be the same size. It's just if you want yours to look closer to this, then you will want all of your hearts to be the same size. So with your little heart stencil, what we're going to do now is first just sort of center it in the middle of your 4x6 sheet of paper, of your watercolor paper. And then I'm going to push it north or up by about 1/4 of an inch so that it's still centered from left to right, but it's slightly north of center from top to bottom. And that's just to leave a little bit of room for our lettering that we're going to do in just a second. So with my non-dominant hand, I'm right-handed. So with my left hand, I'm going to hold the stencil down and I'm going to trace around it with my graphite pencil. I am using an F pencil today, but I recommend you use H pencils, hard pencils, because the lead is nice and firm. It won't bleed or smear, and it will be light in value. All right, so then after you have your first perfectly centered middle heart done, I'm going to use my stencil and I'm going to line it right up next to the center heart. You could do left or right, but I generally work from left to right. So I'm going to hold it right up on the right-hand side of that heart. I'm going to make sure my tips are aligned, and then I'm going to trace around it again to create another full heart to the right of the center heart. And just be careful as you move your hand so you can kind of work around that stencil. And then you'll see there's a little space here. I'm not going to waste that space. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to hold my stencil up. I'm going to line it up and I'm just going to trace around what's left on my paper to have just a very small partial heart. And now we're going to repeat the same process to the left while looking at it to the left of the center heart. So I'm going to put my stencil up to the left side of the center heart now and trace around it again. So we're just repeating the same process just on the other side. And when we're all done, we'll have 2 partial hearts and we'll have 3 full hearts that are all the same size and are right next to each other. Okay, and then I'm going to draw my last little partial heart. And we have the hearts. Now, for the lettering is Be Mine, but you could do whatever you wanted. You could put love, you could do another XOXO. You don't have to choose the same lettering I chose. And the first letter of the word B, the letter B, is slightly to the right of the bottom point of the far left heart. So I'm just going to sort of eyeball it, and I'm going to start my stroke about where I see it here. And I'm just going to try and copy the lettering as best as I can. So this is not really something I can give you like, you know, draw the bee at this length. I could, it would take a while. So this would be something that you could save for later, or just try your best to copy it as best you can today. And you could always take your time later and try to get the lettering perfect. It doesn't have to be fancy lettering. You can just use your own cursive. Even mine is slightly off center, but that's okay, because today I'm just showing you how to make these cards. If I were making this for real, I would erase it and kind of start over. So just do the best you can with the lettering today. All right, and you can always make it look better after you kind of learn the process. So with that, our outlines are done. That wasn't too painful, I don't think. Not as complicated as some of my other classes or some of my upcoming classes, just as a little hint of what's ahead. All right, so I'm gonna set these aside for now, because the next thing we want to do is we want to mix our palette. So I am going to bring my palette down. I am going to bring my water down. I'm going to bring my paper towels down. I always work with paper towels when I use watercolor. They come really in handy. And if you've taken some of my previous classes, you know I really love to mix my palette using a number 4 round brush, but a number 4 round brush wasn't in the supply list for this class. So we're going to use the 1/2 inch 1-stroke brush to mix our colors today. And just like I've done in previous classes, we're gonna stick our brush in the water to help the bristles absorb the water. And I'm going to use it like a spoon. And I'm going to place 2 scoops of water into 8 different wells or containers on my palette. And then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do here in a minute. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, until I've done that to 8 of the wells in my palette, because we are mixing 8 colors today. And this just sort of helps each of the colors start off with totally clean water. It kind of helps us get the right consistency as far as paint to water ratio. We are going to use a fair amount of paint today, because we do need a lot of paint to make these 2 cards. And I really want them to be bold and vivid and very saturated with color. So we are going to use a fair amount of paint today. And essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be mixing a pure hue of a color, like a bright dark hue of a color. And then we're going to create a lighter version of that color by adding white. And I'm going to bust out my color wheel again today in just a second here, so that I can kind of do some color theory with you as well, to help you understand how we're mixing colors, our color palette, etc. But what I want to do first is we'll mix our first color. The first color we're going to mix today is red. So the brightest red in your set. Oh, Siri is going off. I'm going to move my watch. I must have said something that sounded like, hey, Siri. All right. So Alizarin Crimson is the red that's in your palette that we're going to use. It's the top row, 3rd from the right. And I'm going to wet my brush here. And I'm going to do 5 or so passes of this color into the first well of my palette where I deposited 2 scoops of water. And when I say a pass, in case you weren't here 2 weeks ago, a pass just means you're going to run your brush over that color a handful of times, either in a swiping motion or a circular motion, and then you're going to deposit that color into the well of your palette. So that would be 1 pass. So if I say 2 passes, you're going to repeat that process of wiping, stirring, however many times I tell you. So for the red, let's do 5 passes. So I'll show you, I'll count. That would be 1 pass. I always wipe my brush on the rim of my palette to release any extra paint. And then I'm going to do 2 passes, 3. I'm going to do 4. So we want a nice, vivid, saturated, pigmented red. And if you have a scrap sheet of watercolor paper laying around, you can kind of run your brush on it to see where it's at saturation wise. Ooh, that looks good. That's nice and bright, nice and saturated. So you don't want it to be super watered down. We do want our paint to be maybe a little more than half water, half paint. Like if we're talking about opacity level, it's not going to be quite 50%. We're looking at more 60 to 65% opacity. So it's going to be slightly more paint than water, but we still want enough water in here that we have enough paint to work with, that we're not going to be dry brushing as we work today. All right, so we have red here. I told you I was going to bust out the color wheel a few times today. Here's the first time. Okay, so we mixed our red. And I said that for each of the colors we mix, we're going to mix a darker version of it and then a lighter version. So we've mixed our red. We're going to mix a lighter version of it by tinting red paint with white. So if you've ever taken color theory classes, and you would have learned about shade, tint, and tone. So the hue of a color is just the pure natural hue of a color. When I say red, it's what you think of when you think of red. If you were to tint red, you would be adding white to it and make it more like a pink. If you were to shade red, you would be adding black and you'd be making it really dark, like a really deep, dark maroon color. But if you were to tone red, you would be taking red and adding gray to it. And that would make it more like a brick red, maybe more like a maroon. So while we won't be doing any shades or tones today, we will be in some of my future classes. Today, all the colors we mix will be receiving like a pure hue, and then we'll be tinting it and creating a second version of it using white as well. Our color palette today is once again analogous. We had an analogous palette for the snowflake class as well. Analogous means 3 or more colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. So we're going to be mixing a red and then a lighter version of the red. We will be mixing a red violet and a lighter version of the violet by adding white to it. We're kind of skipping over violet and doing blue violet, and then we'll have a lighter version of that. And then we're kind of skipping over the blue, and we're going to have blue, green, or turquoise and a lighter version of it. But we'll need the blue and we'll need the violet in order to mix all the other colors, which is why I'm still kind of considering it analogous. So not to share too much here, because I know we only have an hour, but as you would have learned in primary school, the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. If you mix red and yellow together, you get orange. Red and blue together makes violet, blue and yellow makes green. So the color wheel can really help you know how to mix colors. So we know that red, blue, and yellow are the primary colors. Violet, orange, and green are secondary colors. But a lot of people get stumped if they're asked, what are the tertiary colors? And this is important today because we are going to be mixing tertiary colors. Tertiary colors are whenever you mix a secondary color with a primary. So the secondary of violet with the primary of red is going to give us red violet, or like a mulberry shade. The primary color of blue mixed with the secondary color of violet is going to give us a blue violet. And the primary color of blue, well, this one, and then the secondary color of green will give us the tertiary blue green. Okay, so this is sort of the palette we're using, but you can look at the color wheel. If you want to know how to make turquoise, well, it's sandwiched right in the middle of blue and green. So that's how I'm going to mix turquoise. How do you mix red violet? Well, it's sandwiched here on the color wheel in between red and violet. So it's going to be these two colors to mix red violet. Wait, but how do I mix violet? Well, we mix violet by mixing blue and red. Okay, so that's how you can kind of use the color wheel to help you know how to mix colors. So sorry for that long, detailed explanation, but I hope it's helpful for those of you who never got a chance to really study color theory. And it really will help you become a better, more proficient artist if you know how to mix your palette. And it will also help you know how to use a limited palette. Just as a quick thing, I have some classes coming up where you're going to learn how to mix black. Because if you've noticed in the Skechers Pocket Box set, there's no black. So I'll show you how to mix black in some future classes. But for now, we're just going to focus on our analogous palette. So we have our red. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mix our light red. So we're going to do what I was talking about, where we're going to mix red and then we're going to tint it by adding white. So in your second well, just go ahead and clean your brush in that second well, and that will release some of the red that's still on your brush from the first well. And then let's do 2 passes of red into this new well that we're going to create pink in, or a light value of the red. So 2 passes. And then I always, like I said, I run my brush along the edge of the palette just to help kind of release some of that paint. And then I am going to just swoosh my brush in the water to take off that extra red. This 1/2-inch flat brush does hold a lot of water, so I will run it through the water a couple of times. I'm not going to worry though if I don't get all the red off the brush. It's really not going to affect our other colors, I promise. So after I've done a couple passes with the red, I'm going to tint it with white. So let's start with just one pass of white into the red, and let's see how that looks. Okay, well, it makes it a little less bright red. It makes it more like a dark pink. That's not enough. I want a lighter pink. So I'm gonna swish my brush in the water, dab it on my paper towel, and then do another pass with the white. And I still want it yet a little bit lighter. So I'm gonna do a third pass, but you're gonna have to just eyeball this at home. Just get it as pink as you want. I just want there to be a distinct difference between my red and my pink. So I think where I have it right now, I'm happy with that. I'm going to test to make sure it's about the same opacity as what I did above. It, for the most part, is. I actually think I want to add just a touch more red. This is all these adjustments. That's going to be different for each of us. And then a touch more white. That's better. All right. So
Andy,
now
we're getting some really great feedback. People are enjoying your thorough instructions. Like I said, there's always something we want to interject some education and some knowledge because it just makes you more confident and creative. And thank you for offering all these tips to everyone. But as you said, you're going along with it. Just follow along. You can watch it. This is going to be videotaped and it'll be available at michaels.com/classes in 24 hours. But as Mandy said, everyone, they're all going to be unique creations. So just relax and enjoy and just follow along.
All right, so we're gonna mix the next 6 colors a little bit quicker because I've already explained the color wheel and everything. And thanks for bearing with me with the color theory. I tend to overdo things. If you came to my house at Thanksgiving, you know what I'm talking about. So the next color we're gonna mix is the red violet. So the red violet is red and violet. So you can either start by mixing red and blue equally to get violet and then adding more red to it, since red violet is closer to the red on the color wheel, or you can do it the way I'm going to do it, where I'm just going to shortcut and just add more red than I will blue, since red violet is heavier on red than it is on the blue. All right, so into this next well, I'm going to do 3 passes of the Alizarin Crimson into the next well on my palette. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then I'm just going to do 1 pass of ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue is the second from the right on the top row. It's the less vivid or bright of your 2 blues. So I did 3 passes red, 1 pass blue, and I'm going to take a look at it. Mine still looks too red. So I'm going to add a little more blue until it starts to take on a mulberry shade or that red violet shade. So pretty. I like this color here. I think I'm good. See that on it's a little more mulberry red blue. I know it's hard to tell on camera. It's not as bright as it is here in my studio. And then into the well next to it, we're going to repeat that exact same process. So we're going to do 3 passes of red, 1 pass of blue, and then we're going to add white to it until it's a light enough version of the mulberry or red violet. So just remember, it's more red than blue for red violet because red violet is closer to blue on the color wheel. Now, the next color we're going to mix is blue violet. Blue violet is closer to blue on the color wheel, so that's going to have more blue in it than red. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. The color wheel also helps us in this regard because you can kind of look at the placement of the color, and if it's closer to, for instance, yellow-orange is closer to yellow than it is to red, so it means it's going to have more yellow than red. All right, so I'm happy with my light mulberry. So we did the same thing, we just added white to it. And now we're ready for our blue violet. Like I said, blue violet's going to have more blue than red. So let's do 3 passes of ultramarine into this well. So that's 1, 2, 3. And then let's just start with a single pass of the Alizarin Crimson to make it more purpley. Ooh, that's a pretty purple color. I might add
Mandy, I'm going to just jump in for a second
Yeah.
just to assure everyone that the class is being recorded. It's going to be available on michaels.com/classes. I put that in the chat. But as we said, it's all being recorded and available in 24 hours. So you could follow along, or you could just sit back and relax and join us later on at your own leisure. And also, all skill levels of artists are welcome to these classes. It is posted in the regular class curriculums. Michaels does have a specific platform and curriculum for art and other creations and crafts that are dedicated to children. So I ask that you could go take a look at that on the Michaels website, because they have plenty of information and plenty of art and creativity projects that for all skill levels and for all levels of interest as well.
Thank you, Jeannie. So what I'm doing now, and if you've been watching, I'm doing the exact same thing to the next well of my palette, where I did 3 passes of the ultramarine blue, 1 pass of the alizarin crimson, and now I'm adding white to tint it to make it a lighter version, a lighter value of the purple. Okay. And then we'll just have one more set of colors to mix after this, and that is turquoise. And turquoise is going to be blue and green. You can decide if you want a little more blue than green for your turquoise. I like my turquoises, I don't know if that's a word, I may have just made it up, to be a bit more on the green side. So the 2 colors we're going to mix are ultramarine and viridian green. Viridian green, bottom row, far left. It's a really, really bright green. And I'm going to just start with 2 passes of each of these colors and see what I end up with. And then I'm going to make adjustments to see if I want it to be a bit more on the blue side or a bit more on the green side. All right, I love this color. I tell people red's my favorite color, but I think I might be lying. I think turquoise might be my favorite. All right, I think that is an awfully pretty color. So I have to decide now, do I want it to be a bit more green, a bit more blue, or do I like it as is? I think I kind of like it as is. So that means I'm going to do the same thing to the next well, 2 passes of both of those colors, ultramarine and viridian green. To make another turquoise. And then what color am I going to add to tint it? White. And I'm going to do however many passes of white I need to in order to make it a noticeably lighter value. Value just means the darkness or lightness of a color. So I want it to be a noticeably lighter version of the turquoise. I also think this palette makes the color of the water really pretty. I was noticing that. It goes from sort of a really bright processed red to a really deep, pretty purple. I think that's kind of fun. All right, so I have my palette mixed, but we're going to do one more thing, because the first card we're going to work on, we're going to learn about a flat wash. And it's for this Be Mine card. And for the flat wash, we could just leave the paper white, but I feel like that's kind of boring, and we might make it look nicer, more professional looking if we paint the paper a solid wash of color first before we fill in the hearts. So I'm going to take a couple scoops of my light purple, and I'm going to put it in another section of my palette. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and then I'm going to make a wash by diluting it with more water. So a wash means you're diluting paint with water. So I'm going to put 2 to 3 scoops of water into this light purple I put into a new palette to make a nice light wash of that color. All right. And then I'm going to bring down my Be Mine card. So again, a flat wash is an even wash of a consistent value. So we're going to use this little wash that we created with the light purple and a couple scoops of water to water it down. I'm going to use my 1/2 inch flat or 1-stroke brush, and I'm going to move back and forth quickly so that I'm first working wet on dry, but then I'm working wet on wet as I overlap the colors. And I'm going to evenly cover all of the paper. I'm going to kind of hold my paper along the edges to keep my fingerprints from getting on the paper. If you're using a really thin watercolor paper, if you're not using the classic Winsor & Newton cold press paper, it may really curl up on you. This will curl up just a little since it's thicker. So just kind of hold it along the edges to kind of stabilize it. And just try to make sure that every square inch of the paper is covered with the paint. Mine looks pretty good. And I'm going to set it aside right now to just dry a little bit. And while that is starting to dry, we will do the Xoxo card. So we're going to kind of take advantage of the drying time. And then for the Xoxo card, the technique I'm going to teach you is called a variegated wash. So a variegated wash is a wash that contains 2 or more colors that merge when you apply them, but they still maintain their discrete colors. Okay, so it's different from a graded wash because a graded wash is a wash that gradually goes from a dark color to a light color. And I have a class coming up in March. I'll show it to you real quick. It's this rooster, this watercolor rooster. And this project uses a graded wash technique. Sometimes it's called a gradient wash technique, where we're going to start really dark and it's going to move to a lighter value. So we do the graded wash on the stems with the leaves, and we do the graded wash on the roses. We actually do it a little bit on the rooster's neck too. So if you want to learn more about a graded wash in maybe a non-traditional way, you can take this class with me next month. But today we're learning about a variegated wash. So a variegated wash, when we're done, will hopefully look like the background of this card. I want to point out just a couple things really quick. I like to do my graded washes at a slight angle so that the paint sort of moves down towards the bottom. So as you work, the paint's always sort of pushed, and it kind of helps each color be more distinct from each other. If you do a variegated wash while the paper is flat on the table, you will end up with more of this effect, where the colors really sort of bleed and move into each other. I really like this look, but I also really like this look. So it's kind of up to you which look you like better. If you want the colors to really look distinct but still blend into each other, or if you really like them to move and merge into each other. So it's kind of your call. These techniques do take practice, so don't fret if you don't like how yours looks today. You may just need to keep practicing. So with the variegated wash, what we're going to do is we're going to use 5 colors, and we're going to apply 2 strokes using each color. But we want each section to be about 3/4 of an inch in width. So this is a 1/2 inch flat brush, right? And 1/2 inch plus 1/2 inch is 1 inch, but each of these little strips of color are only going to be 3/4 of an inch. So how we're going to achieve that is we're going to do 1 stroke with our brush of a color, and then we're going to overlap the second stroke of the same color. Okay, to achieve 3/4 of an inch for each color. Now, when we're using a new color, however, we do not want to overlap. The new color we're going to place just under where the previous color ends, and we're going to not fuss with it. So we're not going to go back and forth where they meet. We're just going to apply it so that the 2 colors meet. And then we're going to let the water do what it wants. If we go over it too many times, then it will result in something that looks more like this, okay? So I know that's fast. I'm actually gonna put this aside for now, put that there so you can all see better. And I'm going to hold my work kind of at an angle, because I'm gonna try and achieve it to look more like this. I'm going to wipe my brush on the edge of the water glass a couple of times. And the first stripe is the darker mulberry or the darker red violet. So I'm going to pick up some of that with my brush. And you can see on this example, I'm not starting from edge to edge. I kind of like that negative space, how there's a little bit of the paper showing on both the left and right side. So I'm going to start each of my strips or strokes in slightly different spots on the left and right side. So with my mulberry, I'm going to take it and I'm just going to do a straight line all the way across. When you're working with the same color, it's okay to go over it as many times as you need to get a smooth wash of color. It's just when we're adding a new color, we want to be careful not to go over where the new color meets the old color. So I have one strip of color and I'm going to overlap my second line or strip of the mulberry, just to cover the tooth of the paper. And you can see how holding it at an angle is kind of pushing this paint down here. And that's what we want to kind of help get a nice smooth transition of color from one color to the next. Then I'm going to quickly swish my brush, wipe it, pat it on the paper towel. And the next color is going to be the red, the pure red. So I am going to only apply this color just under the mulberry, just where they meet. And this takes practice, so don't fret if you're having a hard time with this today. It takes practice. I don't even do it perfectly all the time. And I'm just trying really hard not to fuss with where they meet, not to go over it multiple times.
And I just want to jump in and say thank you for providing all these details. The instructions are very thorough, and they were attached with the enrollment that you all have. And I would implore all of you to go back to your enrollment or in the link right now and copy that and print those instructions. But also the recording will be available in 24 hours at michaels.com/classes. So we want everybody to follow along. It's at your discretion if you want to participate or not, depending on your skill set, the timing, but you will be doing 2 cards in the time right now. It's 2:41. We have to keep up the pace because we want to give you the 2 cards that we promised we would deliver for you. So let's keep it going.
An hour is not a lot of time, I know. But again, the benefit of these classes is they're recorded, so you can always pause and rewatch. All right, so I added my second strip of red. I rinsed my brush. The next color is the pink or the light red. And this is something you do want to move fairly quickly because you don't want the previous color to start to dry before you add the next color. Otherwise, you're going to be painting wet on dry and not wet into wet. Like we're painting wet on dry onto the paper, but we want the pink and the red to both still be wet as they meet. And I can tell my red already started to dry, so my gradient may not turn out perfectly, but that's okay. And now I'm going to add my second stroke of the light pink that's going to overlap the red so that it's only 3/4 of an inch instead of a full 1 inch, since this is a 1/2 inch brush. I'm going to rinse my brush. Next color is the light purple. And this one I'm just going to apply just under the pink, and I'm going to try not to go over it a bunch of times where they meet, just enough to cover the tooth of the paper where they meet. Another layer of the purple. Okay, quickly rinse my brush. And then the last color is the dark purple. So 2 strips of the dark purple just under the light purple. You could use any color combination here. This one doesn't have any teal in it, but you could totally add teal if you preferred. Or do another palette on the other side of the color wheel using those colors. The world is your oyster, as my husband says. All right, so there's that. And we're gonna set this aside to dry. And then we're going to pull back down our Be Mine card. Now the Be Mine card, the flat wash we did may not be totally dry. So that's why on the instruction list, there was a blow dryer or a heat gun. I'll be using a heat gun, and I'm just gonna run this over the Be Mine card for a few seconds to make sure it's totally dry, so that the hearts can be wet on dry and not wet on wet, because I don't want the hearts to bleed into the flat wash I did. And that looks like it's pretty good there. All right, so the process is going to be kind of an ombre, if you will. I'll pull this Be Mine card back down so you can see it. We're going to start with the light teal, and we're going to apply that to the entirety of the far left partial heart. Then we're going to apply the dark teal to the left half of the far left full heart, purple to the right half, then to the middle heart, light purple to the left half, light mulberry to the right half, the dark mulberry to the left half of the far right full heart, and then red, and then light pink. So that's sort of the color progression. The color progression is also listed in the written instructions that were provided to you. The secret here is to load up your brush with a lot of paint. We're going to use the number 10 for this because the number 10 holds a lot of paint and will give you a lot to work with. I do see that I'm going to need a little bit more light purple. So I'm going to just mix up a little bit more of that super fast because you do want a lot of paint to work with for this particular project. All right, so that's good there because you really want the colors to bleed into each other. If you don't have a lot of paint on your brush, that's not going to happen as readily. So to the far left heart, you're going to wet your number 10 brush, dab it on the paper towel, and then I'm going to pick up some of the light turquoise with my brush, and I'm going to carefully apply it to the complete far left partial heart. Carefully. I'm using mostly just the tip of my brush to do it so that I don't go outside the lines. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of push the pigment that's there towards the right so that when I apply the dark turquoise to the first full heart, the two colors can merge into each other. So I'm going to rinse my brush real quick, dab it on my paper towel to remove excess water. I'm going to pick up the dark turquoise. And I'm first going to apply dark turquoise to the area where the two colors will meet so they can immediately start merging and blending into each other. So I'm going to apply it along the left edge and you'll immediately see that they're going to start to bleed into each other. Do not fuss where they meet. Let them do their thing organically. And then I'm going to apply this dark turquoise color to the entire left half of the far left whole heart, if that makes sense. That's a lot of words. The left half of this full heart here on the far left. And then same thing, I'm going to sort of push or apply a bit more paint along this halfway point of this heart so that when I apply my next color, the two colors can bleed and merge into each other. So the right half of this heart is going to receive the dark purple. So I'm going to rinse my brush real quick, dab it on the paper towel, and then I'm going to pick up the dark purple. And same as I did with the dark turquoise, I'm going to apply this new color first where the two colors meet so that they can immediately start to blend into each other. And where they blend and start to merge, I'm not going to fuss. I'm not going to move my brush in a back and forth manner. I'm just going to let them organically do what they want to do without interference from myself, which, don't get me wrong, is hard. I think that's the hardest thing about watercolor is letting the water do what it wants. And I think you all know I'm usually a colored pencil artist where you have a lot of control and a lot of precision. So it takes a while to get to the point with watercolor where you're willing to surrender to the water and even anticipate what it's going to do. But if you keep practicing, you'll get there. Okay, so the next color for the middle heart, the left half, we're going to apply the light purple that I had to mix up a little bit more of. And again, I'm going to apply it right where the two colors meet so they can kind of bleed and merge into each other. The more paint you have on your brush, the more of an effect you're going to get. And I'm going to apply a little bit more of this purple along the right half so that when I apply light mulberry here in a second, it'll give the two colors something to work into. Do you like my hand movements here? I like to talk with my hands. All right, I'm going to clean my brush here. And the next color, so the right half of the middle heart is going to receive the light mulberry. Again, I'm going to apply it where the light purple and the mulberry meet. And I'm not going to fuss with where they meet. I'm going to let them blend together on their own. And this is a card we are not going to dry with our blow dryer. We want the colors to completely organically merge into each other on their own as they dry. And because there's a lot of paint on the paper, it will take a while. You might be tempted to do like a acrylic pouring technique where you sort of rotate the paper, and you don't do that with this. Just let them do what they want to do. So when we move this to dry, just lift it. Don't try to tilt it like you would with acrylic pouring, which is a lot of fun, by the way, but we're not doing acrylic pouring today. So just try to avoid that technique. All right, so the far left heart, or the far right heart, but left side, we're going to apply the darker mulberry. So darker mulberry to the entire left half of the far right heart. We're going to let the light mulberry and dark mulberry bleed into each other. I might put a few drops of mulberry along the right half of that color. Quickly clean my brush. And then we're going to do the red and apply that to the right half. And we're almost there. Last color is the light pink. And we're going to apply that to just that partial little heart on the far right. All right, and we're going to have just enough time to finish these cards. Let me just share real quick the lettering. I'll tell you what I do. You may want to wait for your paint to dry. I use a silver metallic marker. I'm using the Michaels Recollections brand, and I'm just going to go over my lettering 2 times. I like to do it 2 times because the second time not only thickens it up, but it sort of hides any mistakes I make when I run over it the first time. So that's literally it. There's no fancy lettering here or application in the marker. I just go over it twice to thicken it up and sort of hide any mistakes I made the first go round. Okay, so that's that. And I'm going to carefully move this off to the side. So those color, and I'm working at an angle today on the drafting table. You can see my paint has all sort of moved down towards the tip of the heart. It's only because I'm at a drafting table. So I'm going to move that aside. And now bring down your Xoxo card.
Hi, Mandy. I'm just going to jump in here real quick. It's Jeannie. We have a very active chat today. Some people are really enjoying, and other people maybe this is a new experience. So as we said, the recording of this class is going to be available at michaels.com/classes in 24 hours. Mandy in the top right corner of her page has some hashtags and where you could find Mandy and follow along. And what we're asking is that you share your artwork, whether you finish it today with us or on your own. Please share your artwork with us at Make It With Michaels or hashtag Windsor and Newton. And you can also follow at Mandy Peltier Artist. So we appreciate everyone. We're going to continue on until she finishes. The pace is there's a lot that was learned today. I encourage you to go back and look at the recording and the instructions as well. All right, so thank you all for being here and supporting us. And once again, we appreciate that Michaels is offering this free class to everyone. And we appreciate everyone attending. Thanks.
All right, so we have one last thing to do today. And I'm going to teach you about a new medium called Winsor and Newton Drawing Inks. I actually have a class 1 week from today that uses drawing inks. It's this project right here that uses 2 colors, the brick red and the brilliant green drying inks. If you don't have drying inks, you can still come and see the technique and see if that might be something you'd be interested in. Today, we're going to be using the gold drying ink. So drying inks, let me tell you what they are. They are dyes that are inside a shellac binder. Drying inks are water soluble, but they're also water resistant when dry. The gold drying ink, the silver, are also pigmented. So there's some gold powder in here. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to shake it up to start, and then you're also going to want to stir it because the pigment does seem to settle for the gold drying ink. But before we start using this, I'm going to do the same thing that I did to the Be Mine card, the flat wash, and I'm going to just run my heat gun over it for a few seconds just to make sure it is nice and dry. It looks like mine is. So that's probably good right there. I just wanted to do that for sure. So shake your gold drying ink. If you don't have gold drying ink, just use a metallic marker. I just think the gold drying ink really gives it like a gold leaf kind of look, and it's just really nice. And I chose the Xoxo lettering for this one because they're real simple strokes. So you don't have to do any real tight curves or anything. So that's why this has Xoxo on it. And the toothpick that's on your supply list is to stir the gold drying ink. You could use the bottom of a brush, but I do find that the gold drying ink, it does separate the pigment from the shellac binder, like I said. So I do like to give it a stir every few strokes. And also, if you drying inks are transparent, so if you want it to have a more opaque look or have more gold powder, the toothpick seems to pull or concentrate the pigment, and you can kind of pull straight from the pigment and drop into the shellac binder as you put down your lettering, and then watch the gold sort of dance into the binder, and it's really pretty and makes it more opaque looking. So you'll see what I mean in a second. But the brush we're going to use is the number 2 round brush. We're going to use that to paint on the gold lettering. And if you look at my finished example here, the X, the curved line of the X is a little bit thicker than the straight line. Okay, so usually with lettering, your down strokes, so when you're writing, the strokes where you pull a line down are going to be thicker than your up strokes. So that's why the down stroke of the X and the left side of the O are thicker than the rest, because the up strokes are usually going to be thinner than your down strokes. So this is how we're going to do it. We are just going to do one single line on each line of the X in the same width. And then we'll add a second line to thicken the downstroke of the X, or to thicken the downstroke of the O. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to give my gold drying ink a little stir here. I'm going to stick my brush in there and wipe it. And I'm going to start by just drawing or painting on really a thin straight line on both lines of my first X, using just the tip of my brush. And then, like I had said, if you want, you can pull a little bit of the powder from the toothpick or pigment and just sort of drop it in. And you'll see how it just sort of paints onto the binder. And like, I feel like this could be a popular YouTube video, just dropping the gold drying ink and then just watching it spread and shimmer. It's really therapeutic. And then I'm going to thicken up that curved line of the X to make it just a little bit thicker than the straight diagonal line that's on the X. All right, so just like that. I just did a second line to thicken up the curved line. And for the O, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start by just drawing around the O in a single evenly sized, or yeah, I guess like just I'm going to thicken up the left side of the O after I draw on one single stroke. But that doesn't mean you have to draw on the gold drying ink continuously. You can chunk it and rotate as you go. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want to lose control. So I might start by going up and then going down and then turning a little. So do whatever you need to do to help you maintain control. You don't necessarily have to do it in one continuous stroke, especially if you're new to lettering with paint or with drying inks, or, by painting it on. And then what I'll do is I'll draw another line down the left side of the O to thicken it up. And because drying inks are transparent, if I want to make it a bit more opaque, I can pull some of that pigment from the toothpick and then just sort of drop it in and watch it dance into that shellac binder. And then I'm going to repeat the process for the second X and the second O. So I think this is a really good introduction to drying inks for you. I hope it whets your appetite, and that maybe some of you might join me next week for the blooms class. It's a class that I really have down to a science. We're going to use pipettes to dispense the drying inks into our palette. So if you see that on the supply list, it is really important that you get the pipettes and you use the pipettes. That way we're not putting a wet brush into the drying inks. We're not diluting them. We're using the pipette to deposit it into the palette.
Thanks for that, Mandy. I put the link to your class on the chat. She's absolutely right that it's going to be exciting and a fun class. But as anything else, when you register and you look at the booking, it'll provide more or less details, because Mandy is very detail oriented. So just be mindful of the supplies. We had some great suggestions from people on the chat. Many of people that have been participating in these classes are artists and they have these supplies around their house, and we're using these colors as guide, to create this desired effect. But you could improvise and use whatever colors you have in your home or in your studio. So thank you, Mandy, for offering that. That looks fantastic. And you're gonna love the gold accent.
I do too. I love it. It just reminds me
Yeah.
of gold foil. It's so pretty.
One of
Okay,
the
so
other things I want to encourage everyone to do is that we will continue to provide these great classes. We have several artists that work with our Winsor Newton products as well as Liquitex. So there'll be a survey that you'll be receiving after the class that we would appreciate if you could fill it out, because it'll also give us some great feedback to continue to give you these classes that are both inspirational and educational. So enjoy.
all right. And then the other thing I just wanted to say really quick is there's gold drying ink on this brush. So I like to do the lettering with the gold drying ink last when I'm already done with all my other cards that I'm going to make. Because when I rinse my brush in this water, it will put some of that gold pigment into the water, and then it will metallicize some of the other, if I were to continue painting and mixing and painting and mixing, you may like that effect. The other thing you could do is you could just get a separate glass of water and just use that to rinse out the gold in your brush. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And that is it. We are done. We have finished both of our cards. As Jeannie said, we'd love for you to put your finished cards by using the hashtag Make It With Michaels, hashtag Winsor Newton. There's also hashtag Michaels Classes. You can tag me on your post at Mandy Peltier Artist. I'm all across social media. Mandy Peltier Artist is either my handle or my username, so you can find me. I'd love to see your finished artwork. If you go to my website, mandypeltier.com, there's also a contact tab where you can email me and send me your picture there as well if you're not on social media. I love to hear from my students and see your finished work. And if you have any questions, I will write you back and answer you. So with that, let me just share my other camera so we can see each other face to face as we say goodbye today. Thanks again for being here. I love these classes. I love spending these hours with all of you. And I hope you had fun. And I especially hope that you learned something new. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mandy. Enjoy.